Good evening. Tonight's tale tells of a terrible terror so terrifying that it truly terrorizes me to tell it. But I will anyway, as I've nothing else to do this evening. It all began in the sinister summer of '67, where at the Wallowing East School of Medicine, a young student by the name of Graham Carnage was courting notoriety with his outlandish theories on the nature of death. Theories that involved the young medical student's mad desire to overcome it. Carnage believed that death was simply a matter of choice. Those that died only did so because they thought that death was the only option available to them. Carnage began experimenting on dead mice, explaining to his fellow students that the mice were only dead because they didn't know what else to do. And he would prove it, he proclaimed, by gently coaxing them back to life. Unfortunately, Carnage's idea of gentle coaxing involved running 15,000 volts of electricity through them, and after several small fires broke out in the medical school laboratories, he quickly realized that he was becoming ridiculous. He was a laughingstock, and, with bitter frustration, Carnage reluctantly abandoned his unhinged ideas and agreed to follow the orthodox syllabus in traditional medicine. But unbeknown to the faculty and his peers, Carnage had simply retreated further into his own macabre little world, working during late evenings and into the night on his own sinister projects. The signs that Carnage had not truly abandoned his unnatural experiments first came to light when a suspicious pet shop clerk refused to sell him 200 gerbils. Later that evening, a witness saw him attempting to persuade an alley cat to step into an old plastic bag he was holding. Then, 2 nights on from this, the local abattoir reported that 4 saddleback pigs had gone missing from one of the pre-slaughter pens. Following a police raid, Carnage was arrested, but later released when no animals, living or dead, were found at his apartment. The officers did find a medical paper written by Carnage that was more than just a little suggestive, and even notes describing the signs, albeit violent, of life returning to allegedly deceased animals. But this was regarded as evidence of nothing other than the already popular opinion that Carnage was but a deluded fantasist withering away inside his own rotting mind. Nonetheless, the local residents of Wallowing East were not about to take any chances. Many of them began to keep their pets indoors at night for fear that something hideously unnatural was being attempted during the darker hours. Then one fateful day, Dr. Raymond Rancidius, the dean of the medical school, despite being generally regarded as open-minded and tolerant, decided that the increasingly dark reputation of one of its students was more than the school could bear. In his own words,
"I always liked Graham, I really did. Those twinkly blue eyes and quite a brilliant mind hidden beneath those wonderful golden locks of his. But really, enough is enough. His nighttime pursuits do not serve his reputation well, and thus by association, the reputation of our prestigious school. I even invited him to my rooms last Tuesday evening to discuss the potentially infinite ramifications of his wildly unconventional ideas over brandy and hot milk. But when I left the front parlor to slip into something more comfortable, my servant Milton caught him trying to stuff my pet chihuahua into a dirty old sack. It really is too much. The irony is I'd have probably given him the damned dog if he'd been more open to discussing some of my ideas about the inconsequential nature of sexual contact in the absence of a gesticulation chamber."
Carnage's rapid ejection from the school served as a bleak turning point. And it was at this point that Carnage, armed with febrile notions pertaining to the myth of the soul, turned his attention towards creatures with whom we are all perhaps more familiar. After all, who benefits the most when death himself lies dying? Needless to say, the sudden proliferation of missing persons posters across the streets of Wallowing East did little to ease the concerns of local residents. First it was the sex workers, then the odd late-night reveller, people unlucky enough to have missed the last night bus. Or at least, that which returns home is not the same thing that left. You see, some of those reported missing would turn up many days later, usually suffering from a bout of amnesia and accompanied by a strong smell of formaldehyde. There were rumours circulating, tales told in a whisper between the terrified local folk. Stories about unusual gates and almost forced propulsion, with strange meaty odours, blank grey stares and laboured motion. More and more people vanished, only to return looking dull and pallid, almost yellow-skinned, with brittle hair and a listless grace that would appeal to none but the mad poet on opium. Yet many of those who vanished simply never returned, and on July the 27th, 1967, the world found out why. Once again, the police raided Graham Carnage's apartment, only this time they found all the evidence they could ever wish for. The harrowing footage in this archive news report reveals it all. Be warned, it leaves nothing to the imagination.
Fuck me, you should have seen the shit we found. Bits of body sewn to bits of other body, swimming in formaldehyde or slowly rotting in plastic tubs, electrical wires sticking out of terrified eyeballs skewered onto surgical spikes like ghoulish lollipops, decomposed genitals attached to power cables, petri dishes full of bits of decaying tissue floating in silver nitrate, hearts connected to transformer units, a lung jury-rigged to a crude ventilation pump, the rotting head of a whore who appeared to have some sort of old man's scrotum sewn across her neck like a dank wispy grey beard. There was even a pig's head crudely stitched to the decapitated body of a missing banker. Quite apt, really. We also found some 60-odd disturbingly pornographic letters sent to Carnage by the dean of the medical school. They were smattered with an ungodly amount of semen. We have arrested Graham Carnage for the sickening crimes of kidnap, mutilation, murder, torture, and an overall insidious betrayal of nature. We have also arrested the dean of the medical school for the far more serious crime of using the chief superintendent's parking space outside the police station, where we found him weeping freely over Carnage's picture in the medical school yearbook.
And thus ends our morbid tale of the disturbing events that led up to the arrest and incarceration of Graham Sebastian Carnage during that long dark summer of '67. It is clear that he was simply a very disturbed individual with an even more disturbing goal. But the next time you meet someone who doesn't seem quite right, old but never aging, slow but never ceasing, alive but somehow lifeless, before you run screaming into the night at the thought that you are standing before one of Carnage's macabre creations, consider the far more likely possibility that they simply work in middle management. Good night, viewers, and pleasant dreams. Now who the fuck is that at this time of night?